Vietnamese women's participation left a significant but limited impact on the outcome of the war due to the constant reinforcement of gender norms and standards. It was inevitable that women had to fight even if they wanted peace. Vietnam is a small country that has had to battle the People's Republic of China, Pol Pot's Khmer Rouge, Japan, French colonists, and Americans. Vietnam's women were warriors, nurses, cooks, recruiters, teachers, farmers, suppliers, and were spokeswomen. Vietnam was China's vessel for thousands of years. Vietnam adopted the Chinese language, social structure, literature, and the concept of the universe. They took on the Confucian belief system, and part of this belief system was believing women were valueless and inferior. Women were expected to be meek, modest, virtuous, faithful, and have a quiet voice. Women had to serve their husbands, fathers, and sons. The women made all the decisions and were seen as right no matter what. One motto they had back in the day was, to have a son is to have something, and to have 10 daughters means nothing. These ideas persisted even after China was removed in the 10th century. The Vietnam War was a people's war because women were involved. Women were as important as men. They were expected to continue agriculture, take care of children, and fight. Women had many roles and methods.
Women also had a significant impact in political efforts during the Vietnam War, as they were able to work as spies and relay messages to soldiers on the front lines. During the war, Vietnamese women were excellent in their ability to gain and spread information. This often occurred in areas where enemy troops and civilians lived near to each other, and women would spread the information they gained without the enemy knowing, as they spoke a different language. Some worked as spies in enemy territory and were able to spread newly gained information to the soldiers on the front lines, with some women in the New York Times article saying, "We placed our infrastructures within the enemy's ranks," and that they can say that many of their heroines in the southern part of the country were people who fought from within the belly of the enemy. Some women worked to spread the political ideas of communism and recruit men into the army as well. Women were also able to disrupt enemy soldiers, with one woman, Ta Thi Kieu, infiltrating a base, getting the soldiers drunk, and helping to take over the base once they were intoxicated. In an excerpt from an article, Vietnam's legendary long-haired army, the long-haired army, with thousands of female members, fought the enemy, demanding an end to the massacres and compensation for the deaths of the innocents, signifying their role in political efforts.
As the men started being drafted into the war, women had to assume the responsibility of being the man of the house. Near 1957, northern women were given the task to continue production while the men were away to save people from starvation. They usually harvested crops such as rice and grain. The northern Vietnamese women were described as one hand at harvest and one hand with a gun to signify the multiple crucial roles women had to juggle during the war. Due to their agricultural efforts, the economy was able to stay afloat, and they were able to provide for their families as well as the men in the army. Even though this was not the most significant aspect of the war, the Vietnamese women were able to help their communities. Additionally, Vietnamese women wanted to emphasize the fact that they were not victims of the war. Rather, in some sense, the war helped liberate them from these Confucian ideologies of being bound to the house.
Vietnamese women had a significant social impact through a variety of methods, including political activism and propaganda in the Vietnam War. Their role in political activism and propaganda stemmed from the fact that many Vietnamese women understood that a communist revolution could free them from any oppression. Vietnamese women were active members of many political organizations, including the ICP, or the Indo-Chinese Communist Party, and the Women's Liberation Association. However, their impact may have been limited due to familial responsibilities and sexism within the ICP. According to Sandra C. Taylor, quote, party members had to put aside duties to parents, and women would have to abandon the notion of marriage or family. In addition, despite Ho Chi Minh's vision that women were to play a major role in the Communist Revolution, many revolutionaries disagreed with women's participation in the Communist Party and their equality with men. Women were also active members of the WLA, or the Women's Liberation Association. The association promoted women's emancipation, sexual equality, literacy, education, and improved medical care. Women also played a significant role in the Vietnam independence movement through propaganda. Women from the Women's Liberation Association spent months teaching villagers about politics to gain support against the regime of Diem. They motivated the people and told women from other villages that they would be liberated against 3 oppressions: male oppression, traditional contempt, and the idea that a woman was a slave to her husband's family. In addition to recruiting villagers for the communist cause, women also spread propaganda in other ways. For example, Trinh Thi Ngo, otherwise known as Hanoi Hannah, was recruited by the North Vietnamese army to discourage and frighten American troops through radio broadcasts. She would play anti-war songs and tried to persuade American troops into believing that U.S. involvement within the war was immoral.
They lie to you, GI. You know you cannot win this war. Your rich leaders grow richer while you die in the swamp, GI. They will give you a medal, GI, but only after you are dead.
Despite traditional gender roles that existed for centuries before the conflict in Vietnam, women used the war and the communist cause as an opportunity to improve their social status and give voice to gender equality. They also played a significant part in the war through spreading propaganda, such as by recruiting villagers and discouraging American soldiers.
After the Geneva Accords, a new set of imperialists and invaders had taken over with the transition from French to American intervention. Around the year 1957, North Vietnam began to assist the guerrillas in the South. Ultimately, the northern women had to juggle multiple responsibilities, consisting of taking care of the family and caring for the children, continuing agricultural production to feed men in the army, and, if need be, fighting the enemy. When examining the efforts they made in the war, in particular, women were able to provide medical aid for the men that fought in the war. Although this was a responsibility they had to undertake at home, it was able to play a large role in the progression of the war. After bombing attacks would occur, women and girls would tend to those who were severely injured and any who fell ill from malaria. However, the women were also involved in the combat and trained to use weapons. Ngo Thi Tuong, for example, had been transporting goods until she spotted U.S. airplanes and ended up taking down one of the 3 airplanes, ultimately confronting the pilot that parachuted out of the plane. Additionally, the National Liberation Front has trained women to recruit forces for the insurgency. Propagandists from the Women's Liberation Association had spent months with villagers teaching politics and conjuring up hatred for foreign oppressors.